Well, it looks like people have slowed down entering the room, so I'm going to go ahead and start. Welcome, everyone, to this last concurrent session of the Capacity Building Institute. We're so glad that you stuck it out and hung out with us, and we know how tired you are from all the work you've been doing with your states. This session is very important to me. It's going to be speaking about correctional education for students with disabilities and secondary transition for this. We have our federal partners from the Office of Special Education Programs with us, and we also have the state of Pennsylvania with us to help share. So we welcome you to this session. Next slide. So today we're really going to be speaking about relative to correctional education. What are I'm learning about some technical assistance needs that we've learned from states about correctional education programming. We'll also learn about the Office of Special Education, or OSEP's Correctional Education Self-Assessment Tool. And then we have the wonderful opportunity to hear from Pennsylvania to learn how they've applied the Correctional Education Self-Assessment Tool in their state relative to students with disabilities. Next slide. And since we're presenting with our federal partners, I need to provide this disclaimer that the contents of this first portion, which I'm presenting on the survey results, are not necessarily represent the policy of the Department of Education, and you should not assume endorsement by the federal government. Next slide. And so what I'm going to talk about today is a survey that OSERS, the Office of Special Education and Rehabilitation Services, had requested that NTAC-C to complete. They were really concerned during the pandemic about what was happening to students with disabilities as there was a mass exodus from correctional education and returning to the communities. And so they wanted to really know what was really happening within those programs. And also NTAC-C is one of our objectives that we're measured on, is ensuring that we provide technical assistance on programming for youth who are involved in juvenile and or adult services. So this was the purpose of the survey. It was administered between December of 2021 through March of 2022. We really pinged people to get as many responses as we could. And we were, the respondents were actually people that were identified who worked at the state level that relative to and responsible for correctional education in their state. If we could not identify that person within the state, the survey went to the state special education director or the state special education transition lead. So at the end of March, there were 48 respondents representing 35 states, jurisdictions, and territories. Why there were more respondents than states is that in some states, correctional education is divided across adult corrections and juvenile services, or they may have another configuration in their state. So we wanted a well-represented sample for what was happening to students with disabilities who were either in juvenile services or adult corrections. Next slide. And so one of the questions we wanted to know is what services are being provided within a correctional facility or a correctional education program, both at the adult and at the juvenile areas. And as you can see, here's a long laundry list of what types of services that are being provided. The top of the list is academic coursework that leads to a high school diploma, or a general education development certificate, or a GED was at the top of the list. There are also a lot of services related to career preparation, reentry planning, life skills, career and technical education, transition planning. And then at the bottom, you can see VR referral prior to reentry and the pre-employment transition services provided by VR providers. You may think that that's represented less within the facilities, but as a TA provider, I was really happy to see that at least almost half of states or respondents were actually thinking about how to provide these services while students with disabilities are still within a correctional setting. Next slide. Also, we also asked them what types of reentry services are being provided to their students while within a correctional education setting. So you can see that there's a little less reentry services being provided, but the services included access to secondary or post-secondary career and technical education programming, community-based reentry support, a direct handoff to local school districts for re-enrollment. That's a critical component, and that was by more than half of the individuals provided that direct handoff. And then also that's like via a vocational rehabilitation referral to upon exit of a correctional facility, and then restorative justice programming and other services for reentry that can support a student as they are returned to their home community. Next slide. And then we also, to help us NTAC drive our technical assistance, we wanted to learn what were some of the challenging um, pieces that were that could help them with that was a sort of a challenge to their correctional education programming. And as you can see, the top two was the ability to hire and maintain high quality special education staff. And we know that's true for the public schools, but it seems to be highly important or highly challenging for correctional education programming for it. Another one of concern is collecting, that was challenging, was collecting information on youth once they have exited a correctional education program. And another one was involving parents or guardians in the IEP process. They found that it was very challenging or very challenging by half the respondents. And another challenge was actually getting the educational records upon a student's entrance into the facility, which then we know hampers what types of services are going to be provided within that if, for example, the IEP is not transferred immediately to the correctional facility. Next slide. And so these next couple of slides, we asked them a myriad of questions relative to what type of data that they collect and what they report relative to students with disabilities who participate in correctional education programming. And so with this caveat, I want you to sort of notice as a survey person is like oftentimes you don't want somebody to respond, don't know. You want them to either force them to say yes, no, or another response. But in this survey, it was very instructive for how many don't knows there were. And so if I were interpreting this, I would think that this would may indicate that there may be a disconnect or a need to improve collaboration between the correctional education personnel and the state special education personnel to inform each other in what data are being collected and what is being reported for that. Because it can, because data that special education collects could be useful to the correctional education programming lead also, and vice versa. So we did ask what states collect outcome data on students with disabilities post-exit. And so almost half reported that they do collect data post-exit for students with disabilities, but almost 30% of the respondents didn't know if that data were being collected post-exit. Next slide. And again, are students with disabilities in correctional education settings included in federal reporting was asked. And as you can see, the blue denotes that the students were included in the federal reporting, and the purple indicates that the individual respondent didn't know if they were included in the federal reporting. And the federal reporting that we asked specifically were about the 4 indicators related to transition, which relate to graduation rates, dropout rates, quality transition IEP, and also post-school outcomes. And we also asked whether just general for all students relative to the dropout data were included for their state reporting for that. Next slide. Yep. And so the topic of this as this presentation, as the next portion of this presentation is going to be about the Office of Special Education Programs Correctional Education Self-Assessment. And so fortuitously, we asked that question in the survey, whether individuals were familiar with this self-assessment. And you can see that only about half of the individuals responded were actually familiar with this assessment. So this is one of the reasons why it was critical to have this presentation at the CBVI so that you can learn more about this self-assessment. Next slide. And so of those who said yes, that they were familiar of it, which were 22 respondents, has your state completed the self-assessment? So 22%, or that would be 5 states, did say that they had completed the self-assessment, but more than half of those 22 individuals didn't know whether that the self-assessment had been completed or not. Next slide. And then we also asked, this is relative to NTACC's future technical assistance, whether respondents would be interested in developing a community of practice on correctional services. And this is just not education services. This would be vocational rehabilitation, corrections, CTE, state personnel who will meet and share and learn from each other. And resoundingly, almost 3/4 of individuals said yes. They were interested in participating in a correctional services community of practice. And if any of you that are in the audience now would like to sign up for it, you can scan the QR code and it'll take you to a Google form to sign up for it. Or you can also download the PowerPoint from the resources section and access the link that way, or forward it to other people within your state who you think might be interested in participating in such a community of practice. Next slide. And so just one more thing before I turn this over to Curtis for the Office of Special Ed Programs is what topics would be of interest in a corrections-focused community of practice. So if you could type that in the chat, that would be great. We'll use this information as we plan our first meeting, which will be, we will announce the date that will be happening this summer. So we'll be looking forward to launching this community of practice. And with that, next slide. There's my contact information, and I'm going to turn this over to Curtis Kennard with the Office of Special Education Programs. Thank you very much.
Deanna, thank you very much. Next slide, please. My name is Curtis Kennard. My colleague Heather Olson and I are the Correctional Educational Lead for the U.S. Department of Education, the Office of Special Education Programs, Monitoring and State Improvement Planning Division. For the next 10 minutes, we will provide you a high-level overview of the Office of Special Education Programs, State Correction Education Self-Assessment Tool. As you can see, OSEP is responsible for ensuring state complies with the Individual with Disability Act. We will be followed by the Pennsylvania Department of Education, Bureau of Special Education Director, and the Monitoring Coordinator. If you have any questions concerning the Correction Education Self-Assessment, you can reach out to Heather and I, and we'll be glad to assist you. Next slide, please. The general purpose of the assessment is for states to assess where they are in the correction ed program. That includes LEAs, which is the local education agency, and the state education agency. Next slide, please. Okay, the self-assessment was implemented in 2017 as a focus area under correction ed for the Office of Special Education Programs. It's a voluntary document that will help states and the facilities to assess their special education programs. The tool also can be used as a monitoring tool if possible. The main purpose is for self-assessment and to identify any non-compliance that the state may have. Also, you see within the slide, you see different links. So the first link links you to the self-assessment. The second link is the Dear Colleague letter that OSEP generated in 2014. The last link that you see is the link to the Monitoring State Improvement Planning Division website, which within that website, you provide more resources And if you have any other questions concerning the resources, again, reach out to Heather and I. Next slide, please. Okay, on this particular slide, you have the self-assessment, and it's organized basically in three main areas. The first area highlights the importance of interagency collaboration. I would say upon the interagency collaboration is essential for a school system, the juvenile court system, and the correction ed facility to collaborate as a student is moving from the school district through the court system into the juvenile justice facility. And as Dana mentioned earlier, the transfer of records is essential in implementing a timely implementation of the IEP and the educational program. The second area provides a tool to evaluate and track the process and also addresses the state responsibility. The third area provides a tool to evaluate and track how IDA requirements are being addressed by the public agency, the non-public agency, and I don't have it on the slide, but any private institution. Let's keep in mind that the state educational agency is responsible for services within the state. Next slide, please. Okay, so the first section talks about methods of insurance services. And on this particular slide, you have several questions that a state or local educational agency should ask themselves. The first question would be, does your state have an interagency agreement or some type of mechanism in place to ensure that services are being provided? And who is responsible for paying for those services? Second is a mechanism to ensure that responsibilities are established between the different agencies. The third question talks about the responsibility of providing special education and related services. Who is responsible? How will it be done? And the fourth question talks about the juvenile correction facility having an appropriate coordination agreement in place with educational agencies and non-educational agencies. So with that being said, you have four questions that's within the self-assessment tool that a state or a local agency should ask themselves to include a private or non-public agency. Next slide, please. Okay, we're in section 1 of the self-assessment, talks about methods of insurance services. As you can see here on this particular slide, that part B applies to all, and I say it again, all political subdivision of the state, no matter if it's the state education agency, the local education agency or school district, or if it's a educational facility or correction facility, I should say, that is its own LEA or local education agency, it still applies under IDA 34-300-154. The second bullet talks about the interagency coordination agreement. Basically within the interagency coordination agreement, there should be 3 particular bullets or 3 particular items in there, but it is not also limited to these particular items. It would be according to the school district and different other nuances that's within the district. Number one, financial responsibility. Who's responsible for the financial responsibility if a SEA is receiving IDA funds and those funds are distributed to a correctional department that's responsible for services? How will the interagency agreement be used to ensure services are provided? The second bullet, resolution of disputes between different agencies. The third bullet is who is going to coordinate the delivery of special education services and related services. So in recap, it is highly recommended that a state or local education agency or a correction facility have some type of coordination agreement in place to ensure that a free and appropriate public education is provided not only to students within correction facility, but all students with disability. Next slide. Now I turn it over to my colleague, Heather Olson.
Section 2 of the State Correctional Education Self-Assessment Tool examines the state education agency's responsibilities for incarcerated students. Stakeholders discuss and reflect on the general supervision at the location of the education program and who is responsible for oversight of the program. Students' participation in individual education program meetings are also covered in this section, as are inclusion in state and local testing and assessments. Personnel qualifications, child find, surrogate parents, procedural safeguards, and due process protection sections are other topics in this section. It is very important to examine each area, as all are critical to the Individual with Disabilities Education Act. Next slide, please. Section 2 of the State Correctional Education Self-Assessment Tool also focuses on the state education agency's responsibilities for incarcerated students. The 618 site, the link which is included in the PowerPoint, provides data to show that Individuals with Disabilities Education Act is being implemented within the state. These data files can be used to examine changes across time in the demographics of children receiving early intervention, special education, and related services under the Individuals with Disabilities Education Act, IDEA. The state education agency is responsible for data which involves child count, personnel, exiting special education, discipline, and academic assessment. Examination and reflection on this data can help stakeholders become aware of trends and gaps in services which may need to be addressed, especially for students who are incarcerated. Next slide, please. In section 3 of the State Correctional Education Self-Assessment Tool, the SCES, the responsibilities of public agencies are brought forward for review. Key components in this section include an examination of record review, which, as mentioned before, is critical to help ensuring continuation of educational services while a student is incarcerated. Also included are the components of Title I, Part D, child find, evaluations, and re-evaluations. Development, implementation, and review of individual education programs, personnel development, least restrictive environment, due process, and discipline are further included in this section of the SCES. Parental engagement, secondary transition, and re-entry are additional areas which are part of this review process. Next slide, please. The tools discussed in this presentation can be used to help states assess, improve, and facilitate the provision of special education to incarcerated students. And these are some of the key takeaways which are important to remember as you think about correctional education programs. The Office of Special Education Programs State Correctional Education Self-Assessment Tool, the SCES, can be used by state and local agencies, as well as organizations and departments outside of education to assess services for incarcerated students and to enhance collaboration. Interagency agreements are critical for entities to collaborate and provide incarcerated students the education they need and to ensure they receive a free and appropriate public education. Pennsylvania will now share their experiences using the State Correctional Education Self-Assessment Tool, SCES, and I will turn it over to them.
Thank you so much. I'm Carol Clancy. I'm the Bureau Director for the Pennsylvania Department of Education, Bureau of Special Education. The State Correctional Self-Assessment was a voluntary document provided to states in or about 2017. Prior to that time, Pennsylvania has had a fully developed monitoring system of all publicly placed entities, including correctional facilities. And that has been in place since the late 1990s. These practices required multiple memorandums of understandings with other agencies at the state level to support the work. However, when Pennsylvania received this tool, we used it as a means of a quality control. We used it as a means to ensure that Pennsylvania was considering all the possibilities and covering all the bases to ensure that students in corrections were receiving a free and appropriate public education. As we went through the tool, we found it was we were in line and it was affirming the work that we were doing, and it helped remind us of some possible revisions we would need to do in the future, such as keeping our MOUs up to date as things change over time. As I stated, we've been monitoring these services within correctional facilities for about 15 years and have developed the necessary strong partnerships that the tool recommends. It's critical to have the quality programs within the facilities because we know that as students re-enter the systems, the better the services that they receive, the better the outcomes they can have, or the better they can transition into the next phase of life. So Pennsylvania has had the system, the monitoring system in place, and Ronnie Russell has been the lead for Pennsylvania since the inception. So at this time, I'd like to turn this over to her to discuss Pennsylvania's process at this time.
Thanks, Carol. And again, as Carol said, cannot reiterate enough, when we did this self-assessment for the first time, and we've looked at it a lot of times since we first looked at it, is I can't emphasize enough, re-looking at memorandums of understanding and joint bulletins with our partners. And as we know, when our partners change, it's quite helpful to share with those new partners that come on as the leads of different agencies that they are aware of our partnerships and agreements that have already existed. Additionally, when we looked at this assessment, and emphasized, as Carol said, the confirmation of what we were already implementing, we did note also that we've been collecting a lot of data through our Pennsylvania Information Management System and through our Penn data to track and evaluate the progress in areas such as noted in the self-assessment, like child count, educational environment, our personnel that are serving our students, exiting special education, graduation, dropout, and discipline, just to name a few. And so basically in Pennsylvania, we have what's called basic education circulars. Again, they are not the law, but they are guidance around all of these different areas that especially our corrections education folks need to follow. Next slide. So something that we do in Pennsylvania, from looking at the state assessment and reaffirming what we're already doing, is we provide continual trainings and technical assistance to our correctional facilities, either directly or in tandem with their local education agency. I feel very blessed in Pennsylvania that we work very, very closely with the leadership at our state correctional facilities, our state juveniles, county jails, county detention, and other residential non-educational placements. We ensure that we have this internal collaboration between agencies. Again, cannot reiterate enough when folks change at a higher level that they are brought into the mix, and that MOUs are looked at quite often, as are interagency agreements. We do a lot of technical assistance and training in tandem, again, with our state juveniles and state correctional leadership. And one of the biggest areas that I'd like to emphasize is in Pennsylvania, since about 1984, that started as a grant, we have a records center. And that ensures the transfer of records and retrieval are completed in a timely fashion. So not every LEA has to use our records center, but it really does give them an avenue, especially in state corrections and state juvenile, when sometimes it's harder to find records on students that have been in and out of the system. Our records center is able to really work closely with our local education agencies where these students have been previously to retrieve records in a very timely basis and conduct child find very timely. So their turnaround time is about a week. So we try to keep it that as closely as we can so that students are being educated as quickly as possible. And I can't emphasize enough our cyclical monitoring that we conduct. We monitor our state correctional and state juvenile facilities every 3 years, and we monitor our county prisons and county detention and non-educational placement residential facilities every 6 years. And the reason that we monitor, and something to look at when you do a self-assessment, the reason that we monitor our state correctional and state juvenile facilities more often is because they are considered to be their own local education agency. And that's how the state education agency ensures that they are being overseen on a more timely basis than everyone else. And then we also have a basic education circular, as Curtis mentioned, on transfer of records, and Heather. And it is called the Basic Education Circular on the Transfer of Records. And this really helps when you are looking to get records on students, and sometimes folks get bulky in regards to giving you those records. That Basic Education Circular helps with that. So child find is really key in making sure that our folks are doing what they need to do for our students. Again, our records center started as a grant. And now with that collaborative effort with our state partners at the Department of Corrections, they now help fund some of those services. And so that's really come out of that. And so that's no longer a grant that way. So I can't reiterate that enough, that collaborative effort between agencies and really that continuous assessment using this self-assessment to make sure that you have that guidance in place. And making sure, as we know in special education, there's a lot of turnover, and making sure that the leadership at the state corrections, state juvenile facilities, the county jails, and the educational entities that are tied to those facilities are aware of their requirements to provide education to our students. Okay, next slide.
Thank you, Ronnie and Carol, Curtis and Heather. This is a time that you can have the opportunity to ask individuals for questions. So please type them into the chat. I have a couple already for Ronnie and Carol, because it sounded like you had a very clear process relative to your correctional education services. And so I know a lot of people are get down and dirty relative to their MOUs. And so you mentioned there are multiple partners in your MOUs. Could you name a couple of those partners? And then I'm sure that the audience would love to know if they could see a copy of your MOU.
Do you want to take that one, Carol, or do you want me to?
Oh, you go ahead, Ronnie. Go ahead.
Okay, all right. So I might miss a few guys, so I apologize. But first and foremost, primarily with our MOU is our Department of Human Services, our Office of Mental Health, and all of those catchment agencies that go along with that. But I would say also our connectivity when we talk about transition, if you will, to our partner agencies with OVR, with the Department of Labor and Industry. And I just say that that's off the top of my head right here, because we've been doing a lot of work with secondary transition and our correctional folks. And I know that our State Department of Corrections, I can speak to the most recently, they have so many innovative programs, and they're even working across with other child serving agencies. So that agreement includes a lot of folks that I can't remember all of them off the top of my head, but all of our child serving agencies would be part of that memorandum of understanding. So any child serving agency in your states should be part of that stakeholder group and conversation.
One thing that we are working on at the state level that has really evolved over time is the data sharing agreements, because the data is electronic now. We still have some paper copies, but it's so much more stored in databases, but each entity kind of has to protect their data. So it makes it difficult to sometimes share the data amongst ourselves based on all of our rules. And that becomes really complicated when we share students. There's multiple agencies supporting a particular student, or with the high mobility rate of students moving from entity to entity and trying to keep track of them. And particularly for students that are court-placed, keeping track of their academic records, because they may move and have different entities tracking their academics, and we don't want them in a situation where they're not getting credit for all of their work. So Pennsylvania is working really hard at developing, as part of our MOUs, data sharing agreements, and even statewide data sharing tools that allows our entities to communicate with single identifying numbers that will allow data to connect without exposing information about students that we wouldn't need. So if states are starting to embark on this, I think with the changes of technology, we definitely would recommend consider how you're sharing your data as well, because I know in Pennsylvania it's a little bit complicated.
Oh, thank you for that complete answer. I so appreciate it. I'm sure that's going to be useful for our audience for that. You mentioned also that you're sort of focusing in on secondary transition, but you've done a lot of training with your juvenile services and adult corrections and the education folks. Could you describe some of the content for that?
Sure. So as you know, Pennsylvania, as part of our state performance plan, indicator 13, we do a lot of work with our public agencies, but also, we need to do a lot of work in corrections. And so one of the things that we really focus heavily on when we do cyclical monitoring of all of our facilities in corrections is that secondary transition piece. And yes, there's pockets, right? But for the most part, I'm very so proud of all of our correctional facilities and their focus on their students and having a plan for when they leave those sites. In fact, one of our state correctional facilities just shared with me that they got a grant and are starting a CDL program. And I'm so very excited, because I have to tell you, when I started this job, that wouldn't have happened at this particular site. And so I think that their collaborative efforts with WIOA, the Department of Labor and Industry, they're just really looking, their vocational staff are looking at other ways to be creative in what they can teach their students to do and get certificates in areas before they actually leave them. They're just really looking at really innovative and creative ways that I think weren't happening in the past as much, like to expand that and really give students something when they leave that setting to go out and have a successful career or job.
Yeah,
I don't know if I answered your whole question, Deanna, but
no, that was
Ronnie
great.
is-
That's great. Oh,
Ronnie
Carol,
is
did you have
very-
something?
I was gonna say Ronnie's very visible, and I think on a broader scale at a state SEA level, if you're looking to develop this or use the self-assessment to develop your programs, Ronnie's very visible. Like she presented yesterday at a corrections conference, she makes sure she's accessible to the staff so that they know how to develop their programs, and she sets the expectations very clearly that it wasn't always as easy as she's making it seem. Not that it's easy, but there's a lot of creative things happening, but that's really based on the oversight and the kind pressure that Ronnie and her team has provided over the years.
That's great. And I really appreciated your description of your attention to detail relative to records transfer, because that is a huge challenge for a lot of correctional facilities, ensuring that happens. And so I don't know if there's any more information of how you set that up, or, and then another sort of a side question is that Child Find is part of that, of the self-assessment, but also part of the Dear Colleague letter, and how that is accomplished within your facilities.
So as basic as I can say it, some of our folks that are more linked to a local education agency, meaning like a local school district, and students are coming to them, let's say in the county jail, students are coming more closely to them, like maybe from their school district or a neighboring school district. They don't have as hard of a time retrieving records on students. It's more so in our state juveniles and state correctionals, I would say, those state entities that are their own local education agency, that they have a harder time sometimes tracking down records when these students have been in multiple placements. And so what I'll say is, our records center, and this started way before me, but when they started, like I said, as a grant in the late 80s, they started by really looking at some of our biggest school districts in Pennsylvania. And one of them, in fact, they actually have a link into that school district. And so, yes, they have to explain, how they have that. Now, it's not a direct link, if you will, but it is a quicker turnaround because folks know that they're part of the state education agency, that they're able to really get records quicker for those students that are coming from that big school district in Pennsylvania. And so, yeah, their turnaround is phenomenal. And then also, when we're working with our state correctional institutions, those teachers have come to know our records center folks so well that they, on a weekly basis, are talking to one another and providing, here is who is here that is the age 21 and under. And they are doing a child find on all of them and really looking for those records and in collaborative efforts with their counselors. And it's, we have 2 diagnostics in Pennsylvania. One is for males, one is for females. And like I say, it's on a weekly basis that they're in collaborative efforts with each other. But again, it goes back to what Carol said, is having that partnership that we've had, and I'm glad that we've kept it. We internally have meetings with folks, but also the corrections education staff at our state corrections and their director are very in tune to what service that we're helping them provide. That it's just been a great collaborative effort, and I hope that never changes.
That's amazing. That's great. Thank you for sharing that. And we have a couple more minutes, I believe. One more minute. Maybe I shouldn't ask one more question, but I just want to pick your brains. It's so fun. Is then that re-entry process of that warm handoff to either VR, back to the school district. Could you briefly speak of that in our last 30 seconds?
Sure. So, and I'm not speaking of this from the lens of the Bureau of Special Education per se, but reentry, again, you can go out to Pennsylvania's Department of Corrections website, and they have a wonderful reentry information and collaborative effort. They actually have reentry, I don't know what they're actually called, but reentry folks that help folks that are getting out, and hopefully staying in Pennsylvania and going back to the county from which they came. And they have a map that actually shows services like transportation, work, other resources that these students can tap into. And so I know a lot of the work, as I said, that they're doing with the Office of Vocational Rehabilitation in Pennsylvania has really also helped with that. We also have a basic education circular that's a collaborative effort, again, with our Department of Human Services in regards to non-educational programs and placements. And it basically lays out for the host school district where the student is being educated while they're in jail, if you will, and the home district where they came from, that they have a collaborative effort and discharge planning when the student is going back. So that is laid out very clear, and we do lots of trainings on that. And again, because there is such a turnover, it is a constant training that you have to be committed to.
Thank you so much. We've learned so much from Curtis and Heather. Thank you for the sharing about the self-assessment tool. And Ronnie and Carol, I can't thank you enough for sharing how you've applied it and your services and your attention to detail for these youth. It's very important that quality services are provided. I appreciate that. So thank you, everyone. And so in 10 minutes, I believe we'll be transitioning to our final session of the CBVI and hear more from the Yeti, our youth empowerment transition initiatives. So hopefully you'll all join us then. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.